You are listening to Belly Birth Beyond with Pelvic Floor Mama. I'm your host, Becca Boving, pelvic rehab certified coach and mom of two. Welcome to the safe space where no topics of motherhood are off limits and judgment is left at the door. Too many mamas are dismissed when they've got valid concerns. If you're sick of hearing that's normal when it feels otherwise, keep listening. Hey mama, I'm so excited to have you here today. We are talking about VBACs, which if you know, I had my VBAC at 41 weeks. It was not induced. And so often mamas are in my messages asking how they can have a VBAC or what they can do. And so I wanted to share a little bit of my story, but I also wanted to bring on someone who works with mamas trying to have a VBAC. She has such great information and knowledge. So Hannah, go ahead and introduce yourself and share a little bit.
Yeah, so my name is Hannah Gill. I am a doula, childbirth educator, also a VBAC mom, and I really came into having a passion, not just for birth education, but for VBAC specifically after the birth of my first, which was a very traumatic, unplanned C-section. And I became a childbirth educator first and then a doula after that experience as well. And VBAC advocacy, prevention of unnecessary C-sections is where my passion is. And I love talking about it and spreading education about it. So
I love that. I think so often that's how everyone within the birth communities gets started because something happened along the way. And now we're trying to prevent other moms from having something happen. Just in case you don't know, and if you don't know that, it's probably a good thing, but a VBAC is a vaginal birth after a cesarean. Want to throw that out there so we don't get all the way through and moms are like, what in the world are we talking about? So there's a lot of misconceptions that come along with the VBAC. And I feel like one of the first things that I personally will ask moms when they're telling me, I think I want to do a VBAC is, what is your provider like pushing you towards? What does your provider feel like? Like, are they VBAC friendly where they're really supportive and they're ready to help you along the way? Or is it more just like tolerant where they are like, sure, we'll try, but you might end up in another C-section? Because I feel like if that's them, then it's going to be a lot harder for you to have the VBAC and you're going to have to advocate for yourself a lot harder. Do you find like that's very similar, or like what's your first step when a mom is like, I want to have a VBAC?
yeah, so that's one of the first steps. There's like three primary first steps I always talk to women about. And the first is make sure you've healed and processed mentally and emotionally from your C-section, because oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes there's a lot of trauma involved, a lot of guilt or shame involved for many, many women. So doing that first before you do anything. But yeah, the provider thing, a lot of women want to find a supportive provider, but there could be limitations to that. And depending on your state,
Sure.
a lot more states are VBAC friendly than others. But just knowing that if you don't have a supporter provider that is just like 100% on board with what you're doing, it's not impossible to have a VBAC, but it's going to be much harder. It's going to be a fight. You're going to have to advocate. And sometimes there are women who just have to be in that type of situation, unfortunately, where they literally cannot find a supportive provider, but they don't feel comfortable birthing outside of the hospital system, which is absolutely okay. They may not medically be able to do that. But yeah, finding a supportive provider is very, very important. But if you are not able to, just be ready to advocate and fight and just birth on your terms and stand up for yourself.
Yeah, and that's huge. And that's where I think a lot of like education comes from too, because if you're going to be pushed into like another cesarean, you want it to be a choice that you're comfortable with. You want to know why, especially after, if the first was a traumatic one, especially after going through something like that. And I remember that being one of the biggest things for me. Luckily, I had taken a VBAC course actually, and I'll drop her name. It's Labor Nurse Mama. She had a VBAC lab. She still has it. And I don't even know if I was pregnant with my daughter when I took her program. It was I think I might have been. I can't remember, because I remember going into we had lost a baby before each pregnancy, I should say. So when I had early ultrasounds, I had early intervention and things to check on how we were progressing. And I remember I think I was like 7 weeks, having an appointment and with like just the intake nurse, just to get everything squared away. And I had already set up like working with the midwives again and doing, I don't know. There is specifically one midwife I loved. Her name was Sarah. I worked with her almost like 90% of my pregnancy with my son because it was COVID. And so she was like the only one who was there, and really bonded with her, really loved her. She did not deliver my baby, actually. Like, she wasn't in the hospital at that time, but it was still all of the midwives. There were 3 midwives at the clinic. And I remember in the hospital after I had my son, all 3 of them came in to see me and was just like checking in and, things like that. And they're like, just so you know, just because you had a C-section now doesn't mean you have to have another one. And I don't know how I was so educated, probably because at this point I was following Labor Nurse Mama. And so I knew about VBACs, but I didn't ever think that it would be something I would have to take in. And I was like, yeah, I actually knew that. But like, having that reassurance and having them come in and be like, we're not just brushing you aside. If there's another pregnancy, like, we're here for you. We're really excited. We're really sorry. Like, you did everything you could. Like, you did nothing wrong. They were just so amazing. So during this checkup, she was like, this nurse is like, you can't see the midwives. And I'm like, excuse me? She's like, yeah, it's policy. You have to see an OB. I'm like, that is not the conversation we had. And it was, let's see, I had my son in August, middle of August, and now we're like middle of October. I'm like, you're telling me in the course of like a year, things have changed? And she's like, yes. I'm like, well, this is baloney. And then she's like, and you're not going to be 2 years from having your son, because my kids are like 22-ish months apart. So you're going to have another C-section. I'm like, no, I'm not. And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, no, I am not. I'm a candidate for a VBAC. I'm going to try a VBAC. That is my plan. And she's like, well, we can't support you. And I'm like, why? Like, and I like reiterate how all the midwives came in, we chatted about this. And she's like, that's just not our policy. I'm like, screw your policy. That's bull. I know that that's not true. And I ended up being on tears during this appointment. And she's like, well, you can find another hospital that'll support you maybe, or other clinics. And I honestly didn't want to deliver at this hospital again anyway. They just have really high cesarean rates. There was one really good labor delivery nurse I had, and there was one really good mama and me floor nurse I had. But I was in the hospital for almost a week. And so think of how many nurses I had. I have a high respect for them. They do an amazing job. But the ones that I had were just, it was not a good experience recovery wise and every other wise. So I was like, well, I don't really want to deliver at that hospital anyway, but I also didn't want to deliver at the other hospital that I had an option for. So at this point, I'm like, I have no provider. I have no hospital. I don't know what to do. Thank goodness for mama communities, because I reached out to my boss's wife, had a C-section or had a vaginal birth after 2 cesareans. So I'm like, who was your provider? Where did you go? And so she went to the big hospital. So if you're in Michigan, we went to the Ann Arbor hospital, and I didn't have to go to the hospital because they have other locations. And there's a doula who literally would see me, or not a doula, a midwife who would literally see me. And so it was just night and day, because and I found out later that this hospital, or the clinic that I was at, had been bought out by somebody else. And so policies really did change because ownership had changed, and a lot of the doctors had actually left because they weren't seeing like eye to eye with all the policy changes. But policy is a load of like garbage. Like, we really need to learn like all of the things about what we can and can't do. So I think one of the things, the scare tactics that is used too, is like uterine rupture, and like the percent of moms who can actually have uterine rupture. So I'll let you, because that is your area I'll let you chat about that.
Uterine rupture is, of course, like the biggest thing we hear as far as feedback. Like, it's risky. Your uterus could rupture. Why take that chance? Just have a C-section. And it is a low risk. So for one previous C-section, the uterine rupture risk without induction, so just no Pitocin, no induction, just VBAC after one C-section, is about 0.22 to about 1%. And obviously that's going to vary depending on personal circumstances. This is just overall. And then there is an increase if you induce with Pitocin, which goes up to about 1.5-ish% depending on, again, the individual. But it's still relatively low. And the one thing that a lot of women don't realize, and anytime I bring this up, people are just accusing me of fear mongering, is that your risk of uterine rupture does not go away with a repeat C-section. So there still is a 0.16% on average chance that your uterus could rupture prior to your scheduled C-section. So it does not eliminate your risk by scheduling a repeat. So, and this is also a comparison a lot of people make. it's apples to oranges, but your chance of like, say, getting in like a car accident and passing away is about 1% as well. And no one is telling you not to get in the car with your baby every day. So I know those are very different circumstances, but that's just to give you a relative like comparison of the circumstances there.
Yeah, for sure.
And even if a uterine rupture does happen, the chances of like mom or baby passing away is lower than that 1%. So it's even lower of that 1% that occurs. So it's not like it's not a bad thing when it happens. It does happen and it can be very catastrophic. But it's important to know that there are risks to repeat C-sections as well, which a lot of people gloss over, that they understand, okay, yeah, surgery has risks, but this risk of uterine rupture is higher. So it's just really about your risk tolerance, what risks and benefits are most important to you, and making sure that whatever provider you have is discussing all of the risks and benefits for all of the options with you, not just saying, oh, VBAC has risks, you shouldn't do it.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's huge. And from someone who had a C-section and ended up in the hospital 2 weeks later because of an infection from my C-section, not even the scar, but yeah, there's things that can happen with a cesarean as well. And recovery is so, so, so different. And I think when people ask me, like, because if you are on the fence and you don't know what you want to do, there is nothing wrong with doing another C-section if that's what you want to do. Like, I will support whatever birth choice you make. That's kind of where I stand, is I will support that. But for me, recovery wise, I would pick a vaginal birth, even with a vaginal birth with a tear, 10 times over the recovery I had with my cesarean, especially because now you're not just coming home to a newborn baby, you're coming home to a newborn baby and however old your firstborn baby is or your second. And you're not going to be able to lift them. You're not going to be able to do as much with them. You're going to have a harder time moving and getting around. A longer recovery, you spend more time in the hospital. Like, there's so many other things to think about and know, like how do you want that to pan out? And I think some of it too is that fear of like, well, what if I can't do it? If you feel like you can't do it when you're going into birth or labor, that is going to be there. And so if it gets to a hard point where you're just like, I'm done, I'm throwing in the towel, then you're probably going to, because you already have that mentality of, I don't know if I can do it. And I even was like, I'm doing it. You're not going to give me another C-section. Nothing like that's going to happen. Like, I was so set on that mentality. But even so, my midwife, or not my midwife, this time it was my doula, because we did hire a doula, which was truly another night and day experience. So if you can do it, do it. There's also virtual doulas out there, but night and day. And every time I was like, you know what? I'm just done. Let's just do a C-section. She's like, Becca, you don't want a C-section. She's like, you want to go pick up your son when you get home. You want to be able to do all these other things when you get home. You don't want another C-section. I'm like, dang it, you're right. I don't like, but I needed that reminder. Right. And so sometimes you need to have something during labor, whether you are going for a VBAC or of just your first birth, second birth, vaginal birth, whatever. You need to have that like coping mechanism and being able to like, what's going to get you through the labor and the birth process. So I think that's a
Knowing
side
your
note.
why. Yeah, knowing your why for
knowing your why.
what you want is so important. And like, not just, oh, I want a VBAC because I want to be able to pick up my toddler. Like, there's deeper whys, and I call them toddler questions. But so think about your why and then say, well, why is that important? And then have that answer. And then, well, why is that important? So what's your core why for what you're wanting? And that will really keep you motivated through the process. And for me, like personally, I really wanted to just do all the things in my power to have a VBAC. And even if it ended in another repeat C-section, whether that be emergency or scheduled or whatever it may be, I would know that that was my choice. It was something that I wanted and that it ultimately needed to happen, not just something that I was coerced into, or I wasn't educated enough, or I didn't use my voice. I knew it would be necessary at the end. So I would be at peace with that.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a huge thing too, is because some moms do everything that they can and it just, something comes about and you end up with another cesarean. But being able to cope with that is huge. Because I do remember still like the trauma from my first birth. And it wasn't even necessarily just the labor birth. It was really like the recovery, both in and out of the hospital with my first birth. Especially, I was 6 days post C-section. and we were home, and my parents, bless their hearts, brought over like a shower chair for me because, everyone in our family has injuries or things like that. And so we have one, but even the shower chair wasn't enough. I still had to have my husband like literally come into the shower with me and help me just wash my hair and like help me move because I physically could not do that, which I know is probably an extreme situation. And that was just what mine was. But I mean, I can still picture like that whole day.
And one of the things that gets brought up a lot is, well, a scheduled C-section is so much easier. And that could be very true. And it is for many, many women. But when you're comparing the two, even a scheduled C-section is going to be harder on your body than having a vaginal birth because it's a surgery. Like, yes, you're giving birth, but it's also a surgery, a major abdominal surgery. And no matter if it's the most scheduled routine C-section or not, it's still a surgery, and your body has to recuperate and recover from that in a such different way than just a regular vaginal birth.
And it's so different even after having a second one, because now you have even more scar tissue, you have even more healing. Hopefully by now, all of you listeners know that your pelvic floor is still involved even if you have a cesarean. In fact, there's times where I would even argue more that cesarean mamas almost need pelvic floor more than vaginal birth. That not necessarily, but like I could argue that to an extent with the scar tissue, with the reconnecting to your core, with just being able to move again, because so many mamas after C-section like can't even touch their scar. And I'm talking 8 years later. It's either numb, it's painful. And then that leads into all these other dysfunctions. Like now you're peeing yourself. Now you have pain with intercourse. Now you have all this hip and back pain, or all the hip and back pain started right away because your core never recovered. And so now your hips and back are like, have no support. So that's a huge thing too. That's a big misconception with cesareans is, well, it doesn't affect my vagina, so my pelvic floor is fine, and I'm not going to have pain with sex or anything like that. And that is not true. And it breaks my heart because I've even had mamas within the community who are like, I ended up with a C-section and I wish someone told me that I would still be like, I could still potentially have pain with sex. And it's miserable. Like she could not for a while.
After my C-section, pain with sex was astronomically worse than after my VBAC. And it was months, and it wasn't until like 5 or 6 months postpartum that I even went to see a pelvic floor therapist. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank you. Because everything was so much worse after my C-section. And I didn't know like, oh, I was going to be bleeding after my C-section, like that type of thing. People think, oh, you're not going to bleed from like have vaginal bleeding after a C-section. And there's just so much more involved than just cutting open your stomach and the baby coming out. Like it affects everything.
Yeah, it does. And that's the thing too, is people listening will be like, what? I went from having a C-section to having a vaginal birth. During my vaginal birth, I did not know what I know now. And I did not practice what I preach to all of my labor coaching moms and programs. And I had a grade 3B tear, which those listening are probably like, what the heck does that mean? It means there was only 2 structures that I did not tear through from front to back. That means like completely tearing from like vaginal opening all the way to your anus. And my recovery was significantly better with that tear than my C-section.
Yeah.
And I actually, I don't remember having pain with sex after my C-section. I remember being like very gentle because like abdomen and things like that. And like, so that was different. But even after that tear, it was like minimal and it didn't last for long. But I also knew what to do. Like perineal massage, I was doing some pelvic floor things, but that's also why I preach so much about why those 6 weeks postpartum are so important, because if you are not engaging your core and your pelvic floor, and let's say you do have a tear like that, even if you don't, it's still important. If I wouldn't have been engaging my core and my pelvic floor when I was lifting my toddler, walking up the stairs with my toddler, carrying my child, doing all those things during those first 6 weeks, I guarantee you I would have had prolapse. Like guarantee you that I would have. In fact, for those 6 weeks, I was petrified that I did, because I never had a vaginal birth before. And I was calling, we're friends, but it was my boss's wife. And I was like, she was the only one that I knew that had vaginal births. And she had 2. Our kids were like the same age. And I was just like, please tell me this is normal or this isn't normal. I am freaking out. I know all of the things that occur when you have this big of a tear, and I've never healed from this. And I just want to know. And she was so sweet. And I think we talked for like an hour on the phone about everything that like we go through postpartum that we don't know, and we don't know if it's normal. And then we wait so long to get help. Luckily, I was in pelvic floor because that's what I was doing at the time. And I had kind of an education, but not every mom has that. So know that like recovery can be so different. And if you do tear, it's not the end of the world, but also there's things you can do to minimize tearing, because I know that's a big fear too. And as I say too, like it's a huge myth. Your vagina isn't loose after you have a baby. It will go back to its original size. And oftentimes your pelvic floor is actually tight. So instead of doing like a ton of Kegels, which I don't preach at all, we need to do some mobility relaxation and just learn how to reconnect with your body. So lots of sidebars here, but I love I love talking about every aspect of.
Before VBAC, learn how to relax your pelvic floor muscles, because that will help you.
Yes.
That will help you push and minimize that tearing, because after my C-section, my pelvic floor was extremely, extremely tight. And of course, I was just doing all the Kegels, and that was making it worse. So yeah, learning, my pelvic floor therapist did help me learn how to like relax and how to properly push to minimize tearing. And I still had a 2nd-degree tear, but I barely even noticed it and had no problems with it healing. So there is a big misconception about that.
For sure. I actually, I think I don't know that I knew right away, but I knew later, because I wouldn't let them pull my placenta. I was like, it's going to be delivered in its own. Don't touch it. Leave it there, whatever. And I remember the one midwife wasn't my normal one. She was just like waiting and waiting, waiting. She was getting impatient. And I'm like, why are we impatient here? Like, it's what is happening that is making you so antsy? And I was getting frustrated. But then she finally was like, you're hemorrhaging. Like, we need to do something about this type of thing. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, is it attached or is it just like sitting at the opening? She's like, it's just sitting at the opening. Like, it's just right here. And I was like, if it's just sitting right there and it is no longer attached, and you can confidently tell me that it is no longer attached, then sure, go ahead. And so that was like, again, advocating for yourself. And luckily I had like midwives and nurses who were actually listening to what I wanted. And like, they had my birth plan posted like next to the bed. They had it posted next to their computer. They had it posted in the bathroom. And I know a lot of people just like dismiss it and it's not there. And sometimes people don't even make birth plans. They don't really have any idea. But that was huge because they were so respectful of what I wanted and what I didn't want. And when it was something that I didn't want, but they felt I needed, we talked about it and we had those conversations. So that's really important to note too, is there are times where, I didn't want Pitocin, but I was hemorrhaging. So they were concerned. So we talked about the risks and the benefits. And so I think they put me on the lowest dose, and I was like, and I just, so we had those communications, which if you don't know, you can't have those, So it's really important to do like take a birth course outside of the hospital. For the love of goodness, do not take, if you want to take it in the hospital, fine, but you need another one. The hospital is going to tell you how to be a good patient in the hospital. It's not going to tell you how you are going to want to birth your child. That's just my take on that one.
And a birth plan doesn't have to be like this rigid thing that you absolutely have to do these things. No, I always have my clients and students like make plan A, like your ideal scenario. Here's your plan. Now, if this intervention needs to happen or something needs to change, okay, now what's your plan B for that? And then what's your backup plan C? Like make all the plans, because
Yes.
if you know and you're aware and you know how to communicate these things to your provider and have this open communication, then that is a huge thing. And not just advocating, but reducing birth trauma because a lot of trauma comes from not feeling heard, respected, or seen and supported in your decisions. So that is such an important thing, is knowing that a birth plan is not like this rigid thing and it has to happen. And if it doesn't happen, then it's the end of the world. It's just a tool to use as you go through your birth process.
Absolutely. And it's like you're saying, if you don't know, or if you're not sure what is happening around you, and things are just almost like it's happening to you instead of like you being a part of it, that's like one way I can kind of explain it too. And I'm sure there's a lot of moms out there who can relate. So just like dive in, learn more. I feel like, what are some other common like misconceptions you get with VBACs? I know uterine rupture is huge. Oh, let's talk about big baby.
Yeah, big babies.
This one drives me insane.
So many women,
Drives
so
me
many
insane.
women get told after their C-section, well, your pelvis is just too small. That baby was too big. Like there's no way you're going to have a vaginal birth. And that's called, like, the actual diagnosis is cephalopelvic disproportion, or CPD, which is on a lot of operative
Yep.
reports for C-sections. Sometimes they just have to put it on there for insurance purposes. Sometimes a provider truly thinks it's what happened. And then women are thinking, well, I have a narrow pelvis. My pelvis is too small. Like I have to have another C-section. And then there's women that go on to have VBACs with bigger babies than their C-section babies that were told their
Me.
pelvis was too small.
Me.
Like, how big were your babies
Yep.
compared?
My daughter was almost a pound larger than my son.
Okay. See, and it's rarely about the size of
So,
the pelvis or the size of your baby. It's usually about positioning of you and your baby during the labor and birth process.
mhm.
So a lot of babies are not big at all, and they get stuck for whatever reason. Maybe you're laying flat on your back and you have an epidural and your legs are up in the air. Like there's a lot of reasons why a
Yeah.
baby could get stuck, not necessarily that your pelvis is too small or your baby is too big. And my VBAC baby was half a pound smaller. So basically the same size.
Yeah. And that's the thing too. CPD, it's less than 5% of women truly have this. And in order to be diagnosed with it, you have to be in active labor and you have to have two medical professional, like two physicians diagnose it, not just one person telling you. Because active labor, you have hormones that are going or that are helping your body to move more, like your joints be more mobile. Your pelvis is already a mobile entity, like it is not fixed. And so you can utilize movement. So if your baby does get stuck, they can travel through that birth canal way easier. There's a way to open the top of your pelvis. There's a way to open the middle of your pelvis, the outlet of your pelvis. It's really important to know like the physiological state of birth, which I never thought I would like dive into physiology was never my thing. I love anatomy. I love that type of thing, but it's so important to know that side of it too. Like what is happening with your baby and how is this going? And so often moms are like, I think I'm just going to have a C-section. They told me my baby's big. Also, ultrasounds are off by like 1 to 2 pounds.
Mm-hmm. They
And
told me
you're
my
talking about
C-section
something that's
baby
like 7, 8,
was going
9
to be
pounds.
11 pounds.
Yeah. How much did they tell you?
11
Oh my
pounds.
gosh.
And I had him at 39 weeks and he was 8.5. I was like,
Yeah.
okay. Well, not 11
Yeah.
pounds.
Big difference. Which don't get me wrong. There's big babies out there. I have a
Yeah.
relative who had like a 10 or 11 pound baby. Like I get it. There's big babies. But that also doesn't mean that you can't birth your baby. I just had a mom who birthed a baby that was like 10 pounds, 2 ounces.
Yeah.
And then I had another one who birthed a 9-pound, 3 ounce baby with no tearing. Like it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
So
Baby squish.
thankfully, my mom and I did not have, big babies, but my whole, like all my cousins on one side, they were all like 10 plus pound babies. So, and they were all vaginal deliveries. So you can do it. You made this baby. You can birth this baby. But again, I'm not going to knock those who are like, nope, just give me the C-section. I want you to know like the benefits and the not benefits of both, because that's really important to like fully have understanding of what's going on.
Another
So,
big one, and this is
especially
going to
the
be
more
relevant.
C-sections you have.
Yeah. Another big one, this is going to be relevant to you, is induction with VBAC. So a
Oh
lot of women
gosh.
are told, like, if you don't go into labor by 40 weeks, then you have to have another C-section, which is just not true. It's just not true. You said you had your VBAC at 41 weeks. So, and so many women are just,
Yep.
they're scared. They're like, okay, if I go any longer, my baby's going to be too big. If I go any longer, I'm risking stillbirth. If I go any longer, I'm risking more uterine rupture because the baby's going to be so big. And so women are
Yep.
either told, like, either if you don't go into labor by 40 weeks, we have to do a repeat C-section or we have to induce you. Or a lot of women are told, like, we don't offer induction for VBAC because the increased risk of uterine rupture. And it should still be an option. Yes, induction does increase your risk of uterine rupture, but it should still be an option versus like going straight to a repeat C-section.
Absolutely. Because it's looking at like how much of a risk is it increasing? Because even if they're like it doubles, but what does it double? Is it still 1%? Is it less than 1%? Is it 1.2%? So I feel like there's some scare tactics out there too. Well, it's like your risk doubles. And it's like, okay, but what is the doubles? Let's like dive into that actual percentage.
Yeah, because if it
Because I
goes
feel
from
like that was one of the
0.5 to
reasons
1,
why.
then that's not
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that was one of and it wasn't a scare tactic that was used by any means. We were given the option, but we just did not understand when we were given that option, because my son, one of the reasons why I ended up in a C-section was it was an induction. He was not ready. It was not ready. Like my first one was 41 weeks on her own, and we could have waited 42 weeks, but it was more of like, she was like, do you want to do an induction? Do you want to wait? Like, and we were both like, didn't know anything at this point, like didn't know anything. We're like, well, what's the pros and cons? And she did educate us, but it was like, well, there's like this percent if you go to 41 weeks, but then it does double if you go to 42 weeks. And just hearing the word double sitting in that room, my husband and I looked at each other and we're like, let's schedule it, like, but thinking back, like it literally went from like, it was still like 2% or less than 2% or something for something to happen at 42 weeks. So when I went in for my intake with my other provider, which I cannot rave about her anymore, because as soon as I called and like just scheduled an initial like intake, there was no question about, is this a cesarean? They're like, I'm assuming you're trying a VBAC, or it was something along those lines. I'm like, you don't even need to know my history and you're going to tell me I could have a VBAC? And they're like, yeah, you can talk with Emily when you see her, whatever. I'm like, already like, yes, please. I'm here. Sign me up. I'm ready. We walk into this appointment with her, and of course I have a list of questions, because I'm like, I want to make sure this is a good fit. I want to make sure that we're going to actually have this VBAC, or at least be supported. And we left and my husband's jaw was on the floor. The amount of information we got from that first visit was more in one visit than we got from the entire pregnancy and postpartum experience with my son in one visit. And it was just, and they even gave out like this giant pamphlet of information and stuff that like I flipped through so many times because it was so relevant. Like it was just done so well. And one of the things that really stuck out with her too was, and this is something that, mom should consider too. I asked like, how long will you let me go before you'll induce me? And she was like, you need to stop with that thought process. She goes, it is not about how long we let you. It is how long do you want to go that is still safe for you and your baby? We will support that decision. And so that was like huge for us. Like my husband and I looked at each other and we're like, what? And I'm like, I don't want to go before 42 weeks. And she's like, okay, as long as you and baby are fine, we will not schedule anything before 42 weeks. And so that's exactly what happened, is we waited 42 weeks and then we're scheduled. So I think the important takeaway is like, it's not asking your provider, like, how long will you let me do something? It's just trying to change the dialogue from, how can you support me having this happen, or something of that nature.
Oh, epidurals is another big one. So a lot of providers will say you're required to have an epidural, and it's a better bet to do that just in case there is an emergency and you need a repeat C-section. That way you don't have to be put under. And that scares a lot of women because they think, oh, I don't want to have to be put under general anesthesia for my C-section, so I'm just going to go ahead and get the epidural. And what I suggest to women all the time is, okay, so if you went in for your first birth and you wanted to be unmedicated, did they tell you need to get an epidural just in case there's an emergency? Because no, they don't. They only say that for VBAC. So that's not a legit argument. And in most cases, not all cases, but in most cases, in a true crash C-section, regardless of if you have an epidural or not, sometimes they may need to put you under anyway. But usually they have time to give you something like a spinal or an epidural, even if it's a semi-emergency. But I would at least like to give myself a chance, because your best chance for VBAC is avoiding unnecessary interventions for as long as possible. So that's just another fear tactic that a lot of providers use, is you want this just in case there's an emergency, or else you're gonna have to be put under. And it's not the way you have to do it.
Yeah. And also I think this is bringing back like the things that were important to me when I had my birth, and mine's different than someone else. So like the things that were important to me may not be important to someone else. But I know one of the big things too that I wanted was, I didn't want to be like hooked up to monitors.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted, if they needed to be hooked up, like I wanted a wireless one so I could move and do what I want. And I remember actually so I went in, I was like an hour and a half from our hospital. So we went in kind of early, but I was 41 weeks. And I remember in triage, they were like, they didn't even have my chart pulled up yet, but they were debating about just sending me home. And I was like, I'm 41 weeks and I live in an hour and a half from the hospital. I don't think you're going to send me home. I was like, but I'm more than happy to go walk downtown. Like I will go do that. I don't have to stay in this room. And my doula was like, yeah, we'll just go get breakfast. I'm like, I don't know who the heck's eating, but sure. So we ended up doing that. And when I came back, we had to stop like every 50 to 100 feet, I swear to goodness. But when we finally made it back 2 miles later, labor was completely different. It was actually starting, you know, things were actually like more intense. They're like, they walked into the room, they're like, oh, this is totally different. And I'm like, yeah, no kidding. Glad you didn't send me home, right? And so we go into like our actual room. And I'm like, I want to sit on a ball. So they got me a ball and I'm just sitting there answering the million of questions that they have for me. I don't ever remember answering that many questions with my first. And that was an induction. So I'm answering like a million questions. And I finally just look at my husband. I'm like, why don't you just go grab all our stuff? Like before like things really progress, just go to the car, grab our stuff. Then we don't have to worry about it later. And he's like, are you sure? I'm like, do you really think anything's going to happen? I should not have said that. So he left. And I start like bouncing on the ball almost in a way. Like I was doing some circles, some side to side. All of a sudden, all of a sudden I felt the like pop. And I just kind of looked at my doula like she would be able to tell me what just happened, even though she did not feel what I just felt. And she looked at me and she's like, kind of giving me that look like, what are you doing? And so like I stood up, I started to stand up because I'm like, did I just, and as I say that, and once I'm actually like fully standing, water just gushed. And I was like, she's like, oh yeah, your water broke. I'm like, uh-huh. And so she's like helping me like take, cause I still was in my clothes and everything. So she's like helping me take my clothes off. She's like, just go sit on the toilet. And I sat on the toilet and I was like, oh hell no, I don't like this position. This is way too much. And luckily there's a tub there. So I hopped into the tub and the warm water was glorious, especially because they had like a sprayer, like a shower sprayer, you know? And so my doula just started holding this shower sprayer like over my like underbelly where uterus, you know? And it was amazing. She finally just gave it to me so I could hold it myself. But the whole time now, all of a sudden there's like 5 people in our room. The lights are all off. My husband comes back and he's like, what the hell happened? I left for 5 minutes. And I had told him nothing was going to happen. And so he's came into full blown labor. I'm in the bathtub. We have like 5 people in there. They're trying to put an IV in because they want to make sure I at least have the port. So if I need anything, they can do it. I have never in my life had any issues with someone getting a needle in my vein ever. Period. End of story. But because my labor had started so early and it was in the morning that I woke up with it, I was dehydrated like
Oh,
nobody's
yeah.
business. They could not get anything in there. I'm talking hours of trying. And I don't even know how many people tried, like 6 different spots, different, like all of the things. And they did give up a few times and like would come back later and things like that. But even like the midwife who was on that time too was like trying to hook me up to a monitor, but I was having contractions. So she was really struggling. And she's like, we really have to do this. I'm like, you're not touching me right now. Like, you're going to have to wait. So they did finally, I think she did finally get it on when I was in the bath, but it took like a long time. But the point is like, you don't necessarily have to, like, if they're saying you have to be to the corded, hooked up to a bed, near a bed or type of thing, you don't. Ask for the wireless monitoring. Almost every single hospital has the wireless monitoring. And clearly it's waterproof. I had it in the bathtub.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, go ahead.
that's how I was with mine too. I didn't want to be hooked to anything because I was already unmedicated. I didn't have a continuous IV. I had the port, but I did not have the continuous IV. I labored on the toilet and in the shower, and that was about it. And I stayed in there. And yeah, being upright and mobile is going to give you and your baby the best chance to get into positions that are easiest for the baby to come out, and being like having that gravity help your body. And you don't have to be hooked to the bed, and even if you have an epidural, you can still get in different positions and be upright.
Yes. That's where I come in because I'm not going to lie. I had an epidural. And I regret it. I regret it. I was so set on having a VBAC that I didn't even think about like, what's my pain management going to be? What's my plan going to be? What are my things? Like, what are my coping skills? Like, I didn't come in with anything like that. I had a doula who was amazing and she did help with some of that, but not to the point where I wasn't like, okay, screw this. I need an epidural. And I did get there and I do regret that. But you know what? And I tell this to my moms too, who join like the labor coaching or like my programs, like you can get in so many different positions utilizing a bed, a peanut ball, a stability ball, the bar that they can hook into the end of the bed. The bed manipulates in so many different ways that you would probably be mind blown. Like it is truly amazing. So for you to just lay on your back, no, or just like lay on your side. Like there's so many different things that you can do. I was lunging, I was squatting, I was peanut ball on my side, I was like squat position. And when it was time to push, I found, I'm not kidding, it was probably like a dozen different positions before I finally was like, this is it. This is the one that I feel comfortable in. This is what feels right for my body. But there are times where I'm like, no, stop. This isn't right. And I literally said that. So if something doesn't feel right, like, you know your body best, and you can try to be in tune with what it feels like and what feels right, I guess. Your mama instincts are strong.
They are. They are very strong. And it's really helpful too, especially for VBAC, to have whoever's there supporting you, whether that be your doula, your partner, your husband, whatever, have them know all of the things you want to. So if you are in the middle of transition and you can't communicate, that they can do that for you.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that was huge. That's why I love, love, love doulas. Like, they truly are so invaluable. I would not, and not even just for me, but for my husband. Like, she was even helping him out. Like, hey, you need to drink some water too. You also need to have some hydration. You haven't ate anything. You need to eat too. Like, just like, and when it was getting closer time to push, like, baby came at like 10:30 at night type of thing. And she's like, everything's going to be closed. Why don't you order yourself some food? Even if you don't eat it now, order yourself and her food. So that way you guys can actually have a good meal when this is over. And just things like that. Like, it was just so helpful and so important about, like, just having that support. Not that you have to have a doula, but if you can, and there's someone in your area, like, it's just, I would have paid her double.
Even a virtual doula is better than no doula at all. Like, if you're like, I don't want someone in my birth space, then that's okay. Like, you can just have a virtual doula too. Like, those are options. Someone you can text or call.
My last tidbit that I would say too for cesareans is like scar tissue mobilization or scar massage. Even if you aren't planning for a VBAC, you're just a C-section mama. That is so important for your healing. And I can't say it enough. And if you're having pain touching your scar, desensitization by using like a really soft towel, a really soft blanket, starting with that, and then progressing to like pressure or your hands, whether you're in the shower or you're getting dressed or laying down at night for bedtime. Like, it doesn't have to be this big, long time. It can just be like a couple minutes every day is going to make a huge difference for that scar tissue. And if you are trying another VBAC, it's really important to work on that scar tissue. So there's not as much for your baby to have to kind of get through. And it's a little bit of a smoother birth. So I think that's just a big piece. People are like, I'm supposed to touch my scar. And it's like, yes, as soon as your scar is healed, you need to be touching it, especially so you can decrease that like numbness or that pain. And I get it, especially if you had like a traumatic C-section, you don't want to touch it. You don't want to think about it, but it's really important to do that.
And it can help you with your mental and emotional healing too, to, in a way, connect with your scar and with your body and forgive your body if you felt guilt like I did. It can just be not a way just to help physically, but to help mentally and emotionally too.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. But Hannah, I so appreciate you coming on. I could talk about this all day long, and I'm sure you could as well. So can you just leave some ways that like people can find you if they're interested in more information about a VBAC or just information?
Yeah. So my website is thehannahgill.com. I am also the Hannah Gill on Instagram and all the places. My podcast is called Motherhood Flow. And then if you are interested in any sort of VBAC support and education, I do have a VBAC preparation program called VBAC is Your Birthright.
Love that. We will put some links down below in the show notes. So if you want to check her out or you have some questions or things, really, I think it's just so important to just have some education and make a decision that feels right for you, whatever that may be. So thank you again, Hannah, for coming on, and we will talk soon.
Yep. Thank you so much for having me.
Nothing is TMI when it comes to motherhood, and common doesn't necessarily mean normal. Always trust your gut and never stop advocating for the care you deserve. If you enjoyed this podcast, help it reach more mamas like you by subscribing and leaving a review on your preferred listening platform. Keep in touch with me on Instagram by following Pelvic Floor Mama. See you next time.